It was supposed to be a quiet night. Graduation had just ended, and the kind of exhaustion that only comes after a long ceremony had settled in. Not the overwhelming kind, just enough to make everything feel soft around the edges. Voices slower, movements heavier, the night stretching out instead of closing in. Susan Streeter was 19 years old. Her friend Stacy McCall was 18. They had plans to stay at a friend's house after graduation. Nothing unusual, just sleep, laughter, the relief of something finally being over. But plans changed. Late into the night, the house they were supposed to stay at filled up. Too many people, too much noise, too many bodies already sleeping on floors. It wasn't hostile, just crowded, uncomfortable. So they did what anyone would do. They left. They drove through the quiet streets of Springfield, Missouri, sometime after 2:00 a.m. The roads were empty. The night calm. Streetlights passed rhythmically over the windshield, one after another like slow blinks. Susan suggested they stay at her place. Her mother, Cheryl Levitt, was home. She always was. It was a modest house on Delmer Street, a place that had lived a lot of life already, a place where the door was often left unlocked, not because of carelessness, but because nothing bad had ever happened there. Not once. The girls parked the car. They stepped out into the humid summer air. The neighborhood was silent in the way only very late nights can be. No movement, no voices, just stillness. They went inside. That was the last time anyone ever saw them. Morning came slowly. Sunlight crept in through the windows of nearby houses. Birds began their routine. Cars started to move again. Springfield woke up. But inside the house on Delmer Street, nothing did. Susan's car was parked outside, exactly where it should be. Her belongings were inside. Her dog was there too, calm, unharmed, wandering the house. No signs of panic. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. No forced entry. No blood. Just absence. Susan was supposed to be at a water park later that morning. When she didn't show up, friends assumed she was sleeping in. After graduation, that was normal. Hours passed. By early afternoon, concern started to settle in, not sharp panic, just unease. Phone calls went unanswered. The house phone rang and rang. Eventually, a few friends decided to stop by. They noticed something small first. The front door was unlocked. That wasn't strange by itself, but it didn't feel right either. Inside, everything looked lived in. Beds unmade. Purses still there. Personal belongings untouched. The TV was on. One of the porch light globes outside the house had been broken. The glass was scattered on the ground beneath it. Someone had carefully swept the pieces into a neat pile. That detail stuck, because it meant someone had taken the time to clean up. Confusion turned into fear quickly. Friends called the police. But before officers arrived, well-meaning people entered the house. They moved things. They cleaned. They tried to make sense of what they were seeing, unknowingly disturbing what little evidence might have existed. By the time authorities stepped inside, the house had already been compromised. Still, nothing about the scene suggested violence. No signs of a fight. No overturned furniture. No screams heard by neighbors. 3 people had simply vanished from a locked-in moment of normal life. Investigators would later confirm something chilling. Whatever happened inside that house was quiet. No one nearby heard shouting, no sounds of distress, no sudden movements that would have drawn attention. Which meant whoever came into that house was either trusted or convincing. A Susan, a Stacy, Cheryl, 3 women, gone without a trace. No ransom note, no witnesses, no clear timeline, just a house frozen in time and a silence that felt too deliberate. As the day stretched into night, the gravity of what had happened began to settle in. Springfield wasn't a city known for disappearances like this. Not 3 people, not from the same house, not with no signs of violence. Rumors started almost immediately. Someone must have been watching the house. Someone must have followed the girls home. Someone must have known Cheryl was there alone. But there was no proof. Only questions. And the longer the house sat empty, the heavier the air around it became. Because whoever took them hadn't rushed. They hadn't made mistakes. They had left behind a place that looked untouched. That was the part that unsettled investigators the most. Not what was found, but what wasn't. By the time police fully understood what they were dealing with, the house had already been disturbed. Friends had come and gone, doors had been opened, items had been touched, nothing malicious, just confusion. People trying to help, people trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense yet. Inside, the house still felt occupied. Beds were unmade, purses sat where they had been left, makeup, shoes, clothes, all untouched, the kind of clutter that suggested people had planned to come back. The dog wandered freely unharmed, calm, not locked away, not frantic. If someone had forced their way in, there would have been chaos. There was. One detail stood out almost immediately. The porch light. Its glass cover had been shattered, the pieces scattered on the ground below, but someone had swept them into a neat pile, not carelessly kicked aside, not ignored. Deliberate. That suggested someone had stayed long enough to clean up, or at least cared enough to avoid attention. The light itself had been disabled. Darkness had been chosen. Inside the house, the phones told another strange story. Multiple messages had been left on the answering machine in the early morning hours. Normal calls, friends checking in, nothing threatening. But at some point, someone had erased them. Not all of them. Just enough to notice. Whoever did it knew how the machine worked. They listened, they selected, they deleted. That detail shifted the tone of the case. This wasn't panic. This wasn't chaos. This was control. Investigators began to consider something uncomfortable. What if the girls hadn't been taken by force? What if they had been convinced to leave? No signs of a struggle, no screams, no broken furniture, no blood. And 3 people, including an adult woman, disappearing at the same time suggested cooperation, not surprise. Someone may have knocked on the door. Someone may have been invited in. The front door showed no signs of damage. The house had not been ransacked. Valuables were left behind, which meant robbery wasn't the motive. That narrowed things, but not enough. Police canvassed the neighborhood. Neighbors hadn't seen anything unusual. No shouting, no unfamiliar vehicles, No sudden movement in the early morning hours. Just quiet. Springfield slept through the disappearance. As hours turned into days, the investigation widened. Tips poured in. Some claimed they saw a van near the house that night. Others insisted they'd noticed someone watching the property days earlier. None of it solidified. The case refused to take shape. One chilling possibility emerged early. The girls had returned home late, tired, relaxed, unsuspecting. If someone had been watching the house, they would have seen the lights turn on. They would have known someone was home. They would have known how many. Police also considered the idea of multiple perpetrators. Taking 3 people quietly would have been difficult alone. But there was no proof. No physical evidence. No fingerprints that led anywhere. The house kept its secrets. As the investigation continued, something else became clear. The scene had been compromised too early. Potential evidence was gone, footprints disturbed, fingerprints overwritten, small details lost forever. Whatever chance investigators had of understanding the first moments of the crime had slipped away. That loss would haunt the case. As days passed with no answers, the house began to feel heavier. Friends refused to enter alone. Family members avoided certain rooms. The silence inside felt intentional, like it was holding something back. Because nothing in that house suggested violence. Only absence. The case shifted from what happened to how it could happen at all. 3 people. 1 house. No resistance. It forced investigators to confront the possibility that whoever came into that home had been calm, convincing, and prepared. Someone who didn't rush. Someone who didn't raise their voice. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. And somewhere in the middle of the night, without sound or struggle, 3 lives were removed from their place in the world, leaving behind a house that still looked like someone might walk back in at any moment. But they never did. As the days stretched into weeks, pressure began to build. 3 people didn't vanish from a quiet neighborhood without answers, not in theory. Someone had to know something. Someone had to have seen something. Someone had to have made a mistake. But the case refused to give anything back. Investigators turned to suspects, not because evidence demanded it, but because the absence of direction left them with no choice. One name surfaced early. A local man known for petty crime and erratic behavior, someone familiar to police, someone who lived not far from Delmer Street. He knew the area. He fit the profile people expected. But expectation isn't proof. There was no physical evidence tying him to the house, no witness placing him there, no confession that held up. The trail ended quietly. Another theory suggested the girls had been targeted earlier that night. Someone at graduation. Someone who followed them from the party. Someone who noticed them leave together. But again, nothing connected. No one remembered anything unusual. No reports of a vehicle following them. No strange encounters confirmed. It was all possibility, no substance. As weeks turned into months, the case began to attract the wrong kind of attention. Psychics came forward. Self-proclaimed witnesses called in. People looking for relevance inserted themselves into the story. And then the confessions began. One man claimed responsibility. His story was detailed, disturbingly vivid. He spoke about the house, the timing, the layout. For a brief moment, it felt like the case had finally cracked. But under scrutiny, his confession collapsed. Details didn't match. Timelines shifted. Information he claimed to know could be found in the media. Another dead end. Police examined the possibility of a serial offender. Someone methodical, someone calm, someone capable of moving multiple people without force. It explained the silence. It explained the lack of evidence. But it didn't bring answers. No similar cases matched closely enough. No known offenders fit cleanly. Years passed. The house was eventually sold. New owners moved in unaware at first, then painfully aware. They reported strange feelings, unexplainable discomfort, not supernatural, just emotional weight. The sense that something unresolved still lingered. The investigation never officially closed. Leads continued to come in sporadically. A tip from another state, a sighting reported years too late. None of it held. The case aged. Memories faded. But the question stayed sharp. Investigators would later admit something unsettling. The crime felt planned, not rushed, not impulsive. Someone had known the layout of the house or learned it quickly. Someone had been confident enough to silence 3 people without drawing attention. That level of control suggested experience or rehearsal. Despite everything, one fact remained unchanged. No bodies were ever found. No crime scene confirmed. Legally, nothing had happened. 3 people were simply missing. The absence became its own kind of presence. Every unanswered call, every unused toothbrush, every room left behind. It wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a void. And as the case drifted further from the present, one thought refused to go away. Whoever did this didn't want attention. They didn't want chaos. They wanted quiet. And they got it. Time didn't bring answers. It brought distance. Years passed, and the case slipped out of headlines and into memory, not because it had been solved, but because nothing new ever replaced the silence. The house on Delmer Street continued to exist. People drove past it. Children walked to school nearby. Life adjusted around the absence. But the absence never adjusted. Investigators revisited the case again and again. Files were reopened. Old tips were re-examined. New theories surfaced, quieter ones less hopeful. Some believed the women had been taken somewhere far from Springfield, removed from the environment before anyone realized something was wrong. Others believed they never left the area at all, that the answers were closer than anyone wanted to believe. There were searches, fields, abandoned properties, rural land outside the city. Nothing. No remains. No clothing. No trace. It was as if the women had been erased carefully, not violently. The lack of evidence became the defining feature of the case. There was nothing to point to a final moment. No confirmed last sighting. No sound of resistance. No indication of fear. Only the knowledge that 3 lives ended their ordinary routines and never resumed them. Families were left with no endings. No funerals. No graves. No certainty. just the suspended state of waiting, stretched across decades. And waiting does something to people. It doesn't fade. It settles. The case remains open, officially unsolved, but in practical terms frozen. Because without bodies, without evidence, without a mistake made by whoever was responsible, there is nothing to move forward with. The silence holds. What makes this case different isn't the mystery itself. It's how easily it happened. No dramatic confrontation. No chase. No noise. Just a door opened. A decision made. A moment passed. And then 3 people were gone. It forces an uncomfortable question. Not who did it, but how often something like this could happen without being noticed. How many nights pass quietly? How many doors open without suspicion? How many people trust the familiar darkness around them? The Springfield Three were not taken from a place of chaos. They were taken from normal life, from a house that looked exactly like it always had, from a night that didn't feel dangerous. And that may be the most unsettling part, because nothing in that house warned them, and nothing in the silence afterward explained what happened. If stories like this matter to you, the ones with unanswered questions and details that never quite fit, consider subscribing. New true crime documentaries every week.